The impact rattled his bones before the alarms did. 1 second, Lieutenant Jace Vero was locked in the Theron's gunnery seat, watching the enemy cruiser's hull rupture in a bloom of plasma fire. The next, a shockwave punched through the ship like a fist. The last thing he heard before the ejection pod launched was the AI's calm, damning verdict: * life support systems compromised. Probability of survival, 3.7%. Initiating emergency protocol. *. Then silence. Jace woke to the acidic tang of smoke and the groan of buckling metal. The pod's hatch had split open like an overripe fruit, spilling him onto alien soil. His vision swam, pain radiating from his ribs, but he forced himself upright. Alive. For now. The planet was a riot of color. Towering indigo ferns, a sky streaked with amber light, but survival protocols overrode awe. Shelter. Water. Avoid hostiles. He'd barely dragged his pack from the wreckage when the rustle of foliage froze him. Not wind. Something deliberate. Drop the weapon. The voice was melodic, sharp with command. The words somehow filtered through his implant's translator. Jace turned slowly. She stood 10 paces away, flanked by 4 armored figures, their carapace-like plating glinting under twin suns. But it was her who held his attention. Tall, her obsidian skin traced with bioluminescent sigils, a crown of serrated silver resting above eyes that burned like molten copper. Royalty. Dangerous. Jace let the scavenged pulse pistol clatter to the ground. Wasn't planning to use it. Unless you're into dramatic entrances. The guard's weapons hummed to life, but the alien princess raised a hand. You speak our tongue? Disbelief edged her tone. Courtesy of a brain implant. Also helps with sarcasm detection. He grinned, blood trickling from his temple. You're welcome. Her nostrils flared. Human. She said it like a curse. The Galactic Accord declared your species extinct a century ago. Guess the memo missed me. Jace shifted his weight, assessing escape routes. The guards had him encircled. Bad odds. So, execution or interrogation first? The princess stepped closer, studying him as if he were a puzzle. You are not afraid. Would it help? A flicker of irritation crossed her face. Good. Annoyed people make mistakes. Your ship is debris. Your people are gone. She tilted her head. Yet you stand here, mocking a daughter of the Vexor Dominion. Why? Jace met her gaze. Because you're wrong. He let the words hang, saw her pupils contract. My people? We've survived worse than your Dominion. A guard lunged, but the princess halted him with a glance. Arrogance. She circled Jace, her cloak whispering against the grass. Or strategy. Which is it, human? Call it a survival trait. He coughed, ribs protesting. You've got the guns. I've got questions. Like why a princess is playing scout. Her hand twitched. Surprise star. You presume much. Just pointing out the obvious. Royalty doesn't patrol borders unless something's wrong. He grinned again, sharper. Rebellion? Rival houses. Silence. Then a laugh like shattering glass. Take him to the Citadel, she ordered. I'll peel the answers from his mind myself. The guards seized his arms. Jace didn't resist. Play the prisoner. Watch. Wait. As they dragged him away, the princess lingered, her gaze locked on him. Not hatred. Calculation. And beneath that, something like curiosity. Jace filed it away. Leverage. The game had begun. The Citadel wasn't a prison. It was a statement. Jace craned his neck as the guards marched him through the vaulted halls, their boots clicking against polished black stone. The walls shimmered with embedded circuitry, pulsing faintly like veins. Alive. The air smelled of ozone and something floral, an unsettling mix of sterile and organic. The princess. *Kyrvex*, her title hissed by the guards, walked ahead, her cloak billowing like liquid shadow. She hadn't spoken since the clearing, but the set of her shoulders betrayed irritation. Good. Annoyance meant she was thinking about him. They stopped before a circular chamber, its ceiling open to the alien sky. A table of translucent crystal dominated the center, holographic data flickering above it. KYR Vex dismissed the guards with a flick of her fingers. The door sealed behind them. Jace whistled. Interrogation or dinner? Hard to tell with the ambience. She didn't smile. Sit. He dropped into the offered chair, stretching his legs. The restraints on his wrists were a joke. Thin bands of energy that tingled against his skin. He'd broken worse in basic training. KYR Vex leaned against the table, arms crossed. Your species' records are contradictory. Savage wars. Fragile alliances. And yet, she tapped the hologram. A grainy image of Earth's last stand flickered. Asterisk this. Asterisk. Jace's chest tightened. The burning cities. The evacuation ships swarmed by Dominion fighters. He kept his voice flat. You'd know more about that than me. A muscle jumped in her jaw. We were not there. Funny. Your Empire's sigil was on every bomber. Silence. Then, abruptly, she switched tactics. You are a soldier. Your neural patterns show tactical conditioning. Wow. Flattering scan. Got my birth date too. Your humor is a shield. She circled him, her voice lowering. You want me to believe you are unafraid. But your pulse spiked when you saw the image of your world. Jace clenched his teeth. Damn. He'd underestimated her tech. KYR Vex stopped in front of him. Here is the truth, human. You are alone. Your people are ash. And yet, she tilted her head. You fight. Why? Jace met her gaze. Same reason you haven't killed me yet. Her pupils dilated, asterisk surprise star. He pressed. You don't just want intel. You want to understand. Because if one human can slip through your defenses, survive your weapons, get under your skin. He grinned. What does that say about your dominion? Her hand shot out, gripping his jaw. Claws pricked his skin. Arrogance, she hissed. Jace held still. Observation. For a heartbeat, they were frozen. Her breath was warm, scented with something sharp and herbal. Then, with a snarl, she released him. You will be tested, she said, stepping back. Prove your worth, or die as your kind deserves. The door hissed open. Guards surged in. Jace laughed as they hauled him up. Finally. Was starting to think you didn't like games. KYR Vex didn't answer. But as they dragged him away, he caught it. The faintest curl of her lip. Got you. The test was a pit. Jace rolled his shoulders as the guards shoved him forward, his boots scuffing the edge of a sunken arena. The walls were sheer obsidian, slick with condensation. Above, tiered balconies teemed with alien nobles, their jewel-like eyes glinting in the low light. At the highest perch, KYR Vex sat draped in silver, her face unreadable. A murmur rippled through the crowd as a gate groaned open across the pit. Ah, Jace muttered. Classic. The creature that slithered out was all teeth and chitin, its segmented body coiling like a living whip. 6 lidless eyes locked onto him. The noble's whispers sharpened. Asterisk this asterisk was their entertainment. A guard tossed a blade at Jace's feet. Curved, serrated. Dominion make. He snatched it up, weighing the balance. No instructions? Just survive? KYR Vex's voice cut through the din. You claimed humans adapt. Demonstrate. The beast lunged. Jace pivoted, the creature's mandibles snapping air where his throat had been. He lashed out, the blade skittered off armored plating. Bad angle. The crowd jeered. The creature struck again. Faster. Jace barely dodged, pain flaring in his ribs. He needed an opening. Needed. His boot hit a wet patch. The creature reared, venom dripping from its fangs. And Jace smiled. He feinted left, then dropped, skidding beneath the beast's underbelly. The chitin there was softer, paler. He drove the blade up with both hands. The creature shrieked, thrashing. Black ichor gushed over Jace's arms, burning like acid. He gritted his teeth, twisting the blade deeper until the beast collapsed. Silence, then uproar. Jace staggered up, wiping ichor from his face. The nobles were on their feet, some furious, others intrigued. KYR Vex hadn't moved, but her claws were sunk into her throne's arms. He saluted her with the bloody knife. Passing grade. A door hissed open behind him. More guards. Jace tensed until he saw the lead one bow. The Rakvex demands your presence, the guard rumbled. The crowd stilled. Even KYR Vex stiffened. Jace arched a brow. Someone higher than the princess? Her father, the guard said. The real power. As they marched him away, Jace glanced back. KYR Vex was watching him, her gaze molten. Not anger. Not even pride. Calculation. He winked. The game had just gotten interesting. The throne room smelled of blood and incense. Jace kept his stride even as the guards marched him forward, their grip tight enough to bruise. The hall stretched endlessly, its arched ceiling lost in shadow, the walls lined with silent warriors in obsidian armor. At the far end, atop a dais of fused bone and black crystal, sat the Rakvex. The Dominion Emperor was massive, broader than his daughter by half, his carapace-like armor etched with scars older than human civilization. His crown wasn't silver but jagged iron, as if torn from a battlefield and reforged in spite. KYR Vex stood at his right hand, her posture rigid. Jace caught the flicker in her gaze as their eyes met. Asterisk warning or challenge? Asterisk. The guards forced him to his knees. Father, KYR Vex said, her voice cool. The human from the borderlands. The Rakvex leaned forward, his breath a low rumble. You butchered my Shryax. Jace grinned. It started it. A ripple of shock through the court. KYR Vex's claws twitched. The Emperor studied him, unblinking. Then, abruptly, he laughed. A sound like grinding stone. Defiant. Like the rest of your kind. He gestured, and a hologram flared to life above the throne. Earth's last cities burning. Yet this is what defiance earned them. Jace's pulse spiked, but he kept his voice flat. Funny. I don't see you in that footage. Silence. KYR Vex stiffened. The guards tensed. The Rakvex stood. You accuse me of cowardice? He asked, almost amused. I'm saying wars are fought by soldiers, not emperors. Jace held his gaze. But you already know that. The throne room held its breath. Then movement. KYR Vex stepped forward. The human's tactics could be useful, she said, her tone clipped. His neural scans show. Asterisk enough. Asterisk, her father's voice cracked like a whip. You presume to advise me, daughter? After letting this vermin live. Her jaw tightened. I presume to learn. The Rakvex's eyes narrowed. For a heartbeat, Jace thought he'd strike her. Then the Emperor turned back to him. Tomorrow, he said, you will fight again. Against my champion. If you survive, you will serve the Dominion as a strategist. He smiled, slow and cruel. If you die, well, entertainment has value. Jace exhaled. Bought time. And if I refuse? The Emperor's smile vanished. Then my daughter will execute you herself. KYR Vex went very still. Jace glanced at her. Her face was a mask, but her pupils were dilated. Asterisk conflict star. He smirked. Guess I'll see you tomorrow, princess. The guards hauled him away. As the doors sealed behind him, he caught one last glimpse of KYR Vex. Her fists clenched at her sides. Got under your skin after all. The cell was dark, but the Dominion didn't believe in silence. Jace traced the grooves in the wall, claw marks old and deep. Some from prisoners. Some, he suspected, from the guards. Beyond the energy barrier, the citadel hummed like a living thing, its pulse throbbing through the floor. He flexed his hands, testing the fresh burns from the Shryax's acid. Asterisk hurts. Good. Asterisk pain kept him sharp. A chime sounded. The barrier flickered. KYR Vex stood in the doorway, her silhouette backlit by the hall's eerie glow. She carried no weapon, but her posture was blade straight. You're alive. Jace leaned against the wall. Disappointed, she stepped inside. The barrier sealed behind her. My father's champion is Zareth. The name meant nothing to him, but her tone said enough. Let me guess. undefeated, unscarred. Her eyes flicked to his burns. He tears opponents apart slowly. Jace shrugged. Sounds like family reunions back home. Her nostrils flared. This isn't a joke. Never is. He pushed off the wall, closing the distance between them. Why warn me? She didn't retreat. Up close, he caught the faint scent of ozone and something floral, like the gardens they'd passed when dragging him to the throne room. You're more useful alive, she said. Liar. Her claws pricked his throat. Choose your next word carefully, human. Jace held her gaze. You need me. Silence. Then, with a hiss, she dropped her hand. Zareth fights with a Vraltek, a hooked blade. It paralyzes on contact. She turned away. Avoid the tip. He caught her wrist. Why help me? For a heartbeat, she didn't move. Then she yanked free. Because if you die, she said softly, it will be by my hand. The barrier deactivated. She left without looking back. Jace exhaled. Well, shit. Dawn came screaming. The arena was packed. Nobles perched like carrion birds in their tiers. The Rakvex presided from an onyx throne, his daughter stiff at his side. Jace squinted against the twin suns as the opposite gate ground open. Zareth was a mountain of muscle and scar tissue. His armor fused to his flesh. The Vraltek glowed in his grip, its barbed tip dripping something viscous. No ceremony, no rules. The champion charged. As the guards led Jace away, he glanced back. Kyrvex watched him, her face unreadable, but her claws were curled into fists. Game on. The victory feast tasted like ashes. Jace lounged at the high table, his fingers drumming against the carved obsidian. The hall was a cacophony of alien voices, the air thick with the scent of spiced meat and something metallic, blood wine, Kyrvex had called it. The nobles watched him with glittering, hostile eyes. He raised his goblet in a mocking toast. Kyrvex sat beside him, her posture rigid. She hadn't spoken since the arena. Her father, the Rakvex, presided at the head of the table, his gaze heavy as a blade against Jace's throat. You fight well for a stray, the Emperor rumbled, swirling his drink. But even the fiercest hound must learn its place. Jace smirked. Funny. I was just thinking the same thing about kings. A collective inhale. The nobles froze. The Rakvex's grip tightened around his goblet. Then slowly he smiled. You amuse me, human. That is your only value. Kyrvex's claws tapped once against the table. Asterisk a warning star. Jace ignored it. Glad to entertain, he said. But if you wanted a jester, you should have thrown me a lute instead of a monster. The Emperor's eyes darkened. Before he could speak, the doors at the far end of the hall burst open. A messenger staggered in, his armor scorched. My liege, the outer reach. The Rakvex stood. Speak. The Krithani, the messenger gasped. They've breached the border. There, he collapsed, a jagged wound in his side leaking dark fluid. Silence. Then chaos. The Rakvex roared orders. Nobles scrambled like startled insects. Kyrvex was already moving, her voice cutting through the din. Ready the fleet. Seal the city gates. Jace stayed seated, watching. Krithani. A new player. A hand clamped onto his shoulder. He looked up into the Rakvex's furious face. You, the Emperor hissed. This is your doing. Jace raised an eyebrow. I've been a little busy not dying to start a war. The grip tightened. The Krithani were extinct. Like your kind. Now it made sense. Kyrvex appeared at her father's side. We don't have time for this. The Rakvex released Jace with a shove. Keep your pet leashed, daughter, or I will. He stormed away, his guards flanking him. Kyrvex exhaled sharply. Come. Jace followed her through the chaos, down a narrow corridor lit by flickering bioluminescent vines. So, he said, who are the Krithani? Enemies of the Dominion. Her voice was tight. They were purged decades ago. Or so we thought. Guess someone missed a few. She stopped abruptly, turning on him. This changes nothing. You are still a prisoner. Jace grinned. And you're still lying to yourself. Her claws flexed. For a heartbeat, he thought she'd strike him. Then, with a growl, she spun and kept walking. The corridor opened into a war room, a circular chamber lined with holographic star maps. The Rakvex stood at the center, barking coordinates at a cluster of officers. Jace whistled. Cozy. Kyrvex shot him a glare. Stay. Silent. He mimed, locking his lips. The hologram shifted, displaying a sector of space. A cluster of red markers pulsed near the border. The Krathani fleet, an officer said. They've taken the Vorith station. The Rakvex snarled. Burn them out. Father. Kyrvex stepped forward. The Vorith is a supply hub. If we destroy it, then we send a message. The Emperor's gaze flicked to Jace. Unless you suggest otherwise? All eyes turned to him. Jace studied the hologram. The Vorith station floated near a nebula, perfect cover for an ambush. You attack head-on, you'll lose half your fleet. The officers bristled. The Rakvex's smile was venomous. And the humans' better plan? Jace tapped the nebula. Lure them in. Let them think they've won. Then hit them from behind. Silence. Kyrvex's eyes narrowed. Risky. So's charging blind. He held her gaze. But you already know that. A muscle jumped in her jaw. She turned to her father. It could work. The Rakvex stared at Jace for a long moment. Then, abruptly, he laughed. Fine. Let the human play strategist. He leaned in, his breath hot against Jace's face. But if this fails, your death will be the first of many. Jace didn't flinch. Noted. As the Emperor stormed out, Kyrvex exhaled. You've just tied your life to this plan. Yeah. Jace grinned. Good thing I like living dangerously. She shook her head, but something flickered in her eyes. Asterisk respect? Asterisk. Outside, the Citadel's alarms wailed. The game had just gotten bigger.